You ever hold on to something so precious, so sacred, that it feels like it's a part of your very soul? For me, that something was my beachfront home. It wasn't just bricks, wood, and glass facing the ocean. It was a living memory of my late wife, Linda. Every sunrise, I'd sit on the porch with her favorite mug, listening to the waves, almost hearing her laugh carried in the sea breeze. Every corner of that house whispered her presence. That home was love, grief, and healing all in one. So when the HOA came knocking, with papers in hand claiming they had rights over it, saying I was violating community agreements and that they could evict me, something inside me broke. I remember standing there, looking at that man in his pressed suit as he smirked like he owned the world. "Sir," he said coldly, "the association has determined your beachfront property technically falls under HOA jurisdiction. You'll need to either comply with our regulations or vacate the premises." Vacate. The word hit me like a thunderclap. They weren't just asking me to change the paint color or cut my grass shorter. They were telling me to abandon my life. I clenched the porch railing so hard my knuckles went white. "This house," I said, voice trembling, "was bought with my blood, sweat, and tears. And it's filled with memories of the woman I loved more than life itself. You're not taking it away." He shrugged, unmoved. "We'll see what the courts say. Don't make this harder on yourself." When he walked away, I stood there staring at the horizon, the ocean roaring louder in my ears. My heart ached not just from the threat, but from the insult. To them, it was just property. To me, it was sacred ground, and I knew they picked the wrong man to push. Asterisk. 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 The days after that notice were a blur of anger and desperation. I called friends, I called lawyers, I even called the county office. Everyone told me the same thing. HOAs can be ruthless. But they don't usually win if the deed is clear. The problem was the HOA claimed there was a loophole, that decades-old property lines had shifted after some bureaucratic error. They argued that my home technically was built on community land. It felt like standing in quicksand. One evening, my neighbor Martha knocked on my door. She was in her 60s, kind eyes, always baking pies for the neighborhood kids. She held a folder in her hands. "I heard what they're trying to do," she said softly, "and I don't think it's right. My husband kept all the original plats from when this community was developed. Maybe you should take a look." Inside that folder was a yellowed map, old survey documents, and even a signed letter from the county inspector back in the 70s. My heart raced as I flipped through the papers. This wasn't just evidence, it was proof that my land was mine. "Free and clear, Martha," I whispered, voice cracking. "You might have just saved my home." But the HOA wasn't about to back down. At the next meeting, I walked in holding that folder. The board members, smug in their leather chairs, looked down at me like I was some nuisance. "You're out of line, one," snapped when I started reading aloud from the old survey. "No," I shot back, my voice steady but filled with fury. "You're out of line. This land is mine. You don't get to steal it with paperwork tricks." They laughed. "Actually laughed, sir," the president said mockingly. "You're free to waste your time in court. But when you lose, don't come crying to us." As I walked out of that room, my fist shaking, I realized this wasn't just a fight for me anymore. It was a fight for every person they'd bullied into submission. Asterisk. The day of the hearing, I sat in the courtroom, palms sweating, folder clutched against my chest like armor. The HOA's lawyer strutted in with his expensive suit and briefcase, smirking like the outcome was already written. But I wasn't alone. Martha sat behind me. A couple of neighbors who had also been harassed by the HOA came too, whispering prayers and encouragement. When the judge entered, my heart pounded. The HOA lawyer launched into his speech about community integrity and legal jurisdiction. He made it sound so neat, so official. Then it was my turn. I stood, my voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with every word. I told the story of how I bought that home with Linda, how we'd built a life there, how her memory lived in those walls. And then I laid the documents on the table. "Your Honor," I said, This map and this letter prove beyond doubt that my land predates the HOA's reach. They've been overstepping their bounds, and if they can do this to me, they can do it to anyone. The room went silent as the judge flipped through the yellowed pages. The HOA lawyer fidgeted, his confidence slipping. Finally, the judge leaned forward. These documents are clear. This property does not fall under HOA jurisdiction. Case dismissed. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Martha squeezed my shoulder, tears in her eyes. The HOA president stormed out, red-faced, muttering under his breath. But me? I just sat there, tears welling, whispering a thank you to Linda. I felt like she was right there beside me, smiling asterisk. The news spread through the community like wildfire. The HOA had lost. Neighbors, barely knew, came up to me at the grocery store, shaking my hand. You stood up to them, one man said, for all of us. But it wasn't victory that filled me most. It was peace. That night, I sat on the porch, the ocean glowing under the moonlight. I held Linda's mug and let the salt air wash over me. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. A few days later, Martha brought me a pie, her eyes twinkling. You didn't just save your home, she said. You reminded us that we don't have to live in fear. I smiled, my throat tight. Sometimes, I said softly, the best way to honor the past is to fight for it. And in that moment I realized this fight wasn't about anger anymore. It was about love. Love for Linda. Love for the life we built. Love for the community that had almost forgotten its strength. The HOA never bothered me again. And though they kept their smug meetings and their endless rules, people stopped bowing so quickly. They started asking questions, standing a little taller. As for me, I still wake up every morning to the sound of waves, holding that mug, whispering a quiet good morning to Linda, and I know. No matter how much time passes, this home will always be more than walls and windows. It's a promise kept. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever had someone try to take away what matters most, don't give up. Stand your ground. Fight for it. Because sometimes the greatest battles aren't about winning or losing. They're about keeping your heart intact. This story is just the beginning. There is so much more ahead. Subscribe to the channel to join me on this journey. Asterisk.